I had sporadic contact with Nathan over the next few years, which I'll share later. But now I had to concentrate on myself and figure out what my next step was going to be. For the time being, work with Barry had dried up, and I suppose I should have bugged him, but it just wasn't my style. Frankly, I never wanted to appear desperate. I did drop subtle hints every now and again, such as, I'm always available if you need me for anything, Barry. I think in a way I was too available, which can be another sign of desperation. I wasn't pushy enough. I think that was my problem. But it wasn't me. However, I began to realize a bit too late, I'm afraid, that it's important to ask for what you want. You need to be direct, self-assured, know your own self-worth. I've given examples in my story of times I did stand up for myself and was willing to walk away, confident that something better was around the corner, believing that there's always a parachute. But I'm also human. As much as I have faith and trust in the process of life, and an inner knowing that everything's going to turn out exactly as it's supposed to, insecurities do creep in. It's important to realize, though, that when your back's against the wall, there's nowhere else to go but forward. There's another door yet to open. I'd met Larry Goldman in Baltimore through a friend, radio personality Stan the Fan Charles, several years earlier. Larry now lived in Florida and was always sending me scripts and ideas for film projects that we could both get involved with. Larry always seemed to have plenty of money, some of which I assumed came from his wealthy family, but I wasn't sure what he actually did for a living. He might have been a stockbroker or something like that, but he was very generous, a good guy, or to use the Jewish word, a mensch. I don't believe he was involved in anything shady at all, although he did seem to attract a few questionable people. On one of his regular trips to Los Angeles in the previous couple of years, he'd become friends with a man and woman who were putting together a film production company. They'd mostly produced extreme sports sequences for TV shows, but were eager to expand into features. They had several scripts they were developing, but needed financing. In my gut, I felt they were grooming Larry, and in fact, they'd already relieved him of several thousands of dollars. But he believed in them, he trusted them. He was adamant that I be a major part of this production company. I'd had several conversations with the woman, and although she seemed legit, I was wary. I guess I'd become jaded over the years. Anyway, all I could do was wait and see and keep my fingers crossed that Larry wasn't being scammed. Now, here I was in Brewster, New York, with no immediate prospects for making money. I did think of registering with temp agencies, but quite honestly, it just wasn't something I was too enthusiastic about. Then Larry kindly gave me a holding fee while negotiations were underway to secure office space in Santa Monica, and I made the decision to move back to LA. During all of this, I'm glad to say that I was very happily immersed in playing the dual role of Dottie and Mrs. Clackett in the play Noises Off at the Town Players Theatre in Newtown. Mary Poyle was co-directing with another older English lady, Evelyn Thomas, a veteran of the Town Players. If you're familiar with the play or film, you'll know how wacky it is. It was definitely an audience pleaser. The laughter was non-stop. It was such a satisfying and fun experience. I loved every minute of it. Although I was quite sceptical about Larry's partnership with the two producers, who I prefer not to name, the production company did seem to be coming together, and more people were on board. In addition, I was being promised a very decent salary with all the necessary benefits, and I was beginning to feel a little more optimistic about the whole thing. So I started making plans to move back to Los Angeles. My friends already knew, of course, And then I told Barry and his family. He said, stay in touch. And naturally I said, if you need anything, just let me know. Damn, I said it again. I'm available. I'd asked my friend Suzanne, who'd previously driven with me from LA to Connecticut via Virginia, if she was willing to drive back with me, and she said she would. It had been exactly 3 years since we'd driven east to Connecticut, and now here we were on the road back to California. This journey west wasn't quite as dramatic as when we were heading east, thank goodness. There were no disappearing acts from Pumpkin, and he actually seemed quite content. He was obviously now a seasoned traveller, although there was more to come for him. On the way back, I would have still liked to have gone to New Orleans, but it wasn't a good time. The city was suffering from the horrendous aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. So we took the route through New Mexico, where we stayed with a friend of Suzanne's. Then on to Arizona, where Suzanne was going to stay with her sister, while Pumpkin and I continued to California in the 25-foot van. We did okay. We ended up in North Hollywood, and with the help of my friend Gail and a couple of strong males, we unloaded all my stuff into a storage unit. We stayed with Gail until I found a place to live. There was actually an apartment available in Santa Monica in the building where I'd lived for 23 years. However, the rent had doubled in the 3 years I was away. And although I'd enjoyed living there, I had no desire to move back in. I then found a place, a cheaper place, by the way, in Brentwood, just east of Santa Monica. I'd arranged to meet Larry and the two producers in Santa Monica to take a look at the office space they'd secured for the production company. Then I got a disturbing call from Larry. He discovered that there was no office space. He'd been trying to reach the couple for a few days, and they were nowhere to be found. He was devastated. Although I'd had my doubts about the authenticity of this couple, I didn't really want to burst Larry's bubble. He was always so enthusiastic about everything and everyone. I felt really bad for him. But he was more concerned that I'd moved back to LA for nothing. I reassured him that I was fine and had no regrets. Even though it was a very disappointing experience, especially for Larry. As usual, I knew there'd be another opportunity around the corner. I told him this too. But he decided to return to Florida, a lot lighter in his pocket and heavier in his heart. I discovered that Holly Grove, the children's home in Hollywood, where I'd spent 10 years volunteering, had closed the previous year. It had been a residential facility for abused and abandoned children for 125 years. But now the emphasis was on keeping children with family members or friends rather than in a home or orphanage, which of course carried a stigma. I was having lunch with another former volunteer, and we were reminiscing about the children and hoping that they were happy living with distant relatives. I told her that I was looking for work, and she said her friend Susan Smith, a former agent and now a talent manager, was looking for an assistant. Was I interested? She warned me that Susan could be difficult. But the next day I was in Susan Smith's palatial home office in Beverly Hills, and she pretty much hired me on the spot. She was leaving for New Zealand the following week for the wedding of her client, Melanie Linsky, who she discovered when Melanie made her feature film debut alongside Kate Winslet in Heavenly Creatures. Melanie was now a regular on the long-running TV series 2.5 Men. Susan would be away for 3 weeks and desperately needed someone to take care of her business while she was gone. And I fit the bill. I seemed responsible and she liked my credentials. For 35 years, Susan Smith had operated a very successful talent agency business in New York and had represented practically every major name and Oscar winner you can think of. She was now running her own one-woman show as a talent manager and was a tyrant as she fought for her clients, who included Kathy Bates, Brian Dennehy, the English actor Charles Dance, and a host of other wonderful character actors. She'd also represented Lynn Redgrave, but they'd recently parted ways. I met Lynn when she came to the house to pick up a box of the photo books which she and her photographer daughter Annabelle had compiled, documenting Lynn's breast cancer journey. I especially appreciated her positive attitude to the cancer, not battling it, not fighting it, but taking it in her stride, continuing to live and to thrive. I told her that that had been my attitude too, and we hugged. Sadly, Lynn Redgrave died a few years later, in 2010. While Susan was away, I got to know her clients over the phone. They were all lovely and totally dedicated to their feisty manager. More about her next time, as well as my appearance in a film with Robert De Niro, and then another with basketball star Dennis Rodman. From the sublime to the ridiculous. Bye for now.